Hey everybody, hi, Hey here, it's JJ. I'm here with a deck profile for you guys, for people who are interested in the BCS top 4, top 8 deck profile for Osnabrück. I played good old Orfist and I guess during that day. I feel that this deck is really, really slept on. A lot of your matchups are relatively good. I think some of your worst matchups you tend to have are against archetypes that can rush you relatively early, but if those archetypes can use some counterblast, you can tend to play it slower, or you can sculpt your hands to choose how you play the game out. First things first, we're actually going to start a little bit differently. We're going to move to the orders first before we move to the grade 1s, 2s, and 3s. So let's talk about the orders, the choice of my orders. I was playing an older list of 4, 4, and 2, which I was playing the draw order 4 copies of, but I changed that into something else. So we're running 4 copies of the +5 order for your tokens that you call that turn. Then we also have the summon a token order, which is very good into matchups like Gravidia, into matchups that tend to retire a lot of your rear guards, like Baron Magnus, for example. And this is also relatively good into matchups that can tend to go a bit longer into the game, or if your hand is kind of looking weak and you want to sculpt it a little bit better. We're playing 3 of those as well. So we're playing 10 orders in total. You could cut maybe 2 orders down, so you can maybe cut to 2 of this, 2 of this if you want to, or you can still keep playing these and maybe you can cut 1 of this and maybe 1 of the 2 other orders over here if you want to play a leaner order count to play some other units as well. There's also going to be the new grade 3 that's going to be coming out in set 6, and we also have the promo token maker Kaluga, which is going to be coming out in October too. So that's a bunch of stuff to look forward to. It's going to take a while before we get this deck to full power, to full strength, but hopefully this is a way that allows you guys to play the deck that you want to. There we go. So that's enough about the orders. We could talk a little bit more about them while I bring up the other ones. So let's head over to the grade 2s that we ended up running. We're running 4 copies of Aiding Beast Tektien, which is the order searcher, which is really good. Which is really good. He tends to be a really good way of filtering the extra gunk out of your deck, which is then the orders, and then you can end up resolving a lot more triggers. There are moments, of course, why I said why I told to many people that this deck can relatively be really high roll, that this does need to resolve if your hand is not that good, but if you do save more copies of it, it can be really good to your game plan of being able to progress your order count a lot further. Knowing what you discard in this deck is kind of important, especially of how your hand tends to open sometimes. And then we're running 3 copies of Colmagede. How I had it before, I was running 3 copies of the Cardinal Bison, the grade 2 that can counterblast 1 and counterblast 1 if you're in Abyssal Dark Knight. So if you have 2 or more of your orders face up and no other orders, you get to call a Shadow Army token. And then if you happen to have any of the other grade 3 orders face up, that token get a little bit of power, especially if in a Persona right turn, you can call them in your other you can call them both separate rearguard circles front row, so then you can attack for 20, attack for 25 for 35, then attack with Vanguard, discard a card, which is then maybe a Tektien or maybe another order, especially if you have Persona right for another turn. Then you can get upwards to the 5 attacks that you're going to need, which is really nice, because even if it swings for 20 is still good. You can even poke a rearguard with it. Sometimes you can attack one of the interceptors, and into some matchups, it's a good way of getting some really good grade 3 first turn aggression, because then you can call your token and the Bison in the same column and have a 25k column as well, and then you can attack with your Vanguard attack with the Bison is still, 25k shield to 20k shield, which is still nothing to sneeze at, and especially it's a 5k shield intercept. So it's a lot of very good potential gas that you can use. So find wherever you can find space for it and play it yourself if you want to. But until then, that's an option. Then to my grade 1s that we're running 3 copies of Thumbarino and then 3 copies of Boba Mine. You can cut this down to 2. And you can run 4 copies of Thumbarino, but I like 3 copies of Boba Mine, because if you're playing like against matchups like Gravidia, for example, they tend to choke you out on damage if you don't want to instantly die to them, because their deck tends to filter relatively easy. Of all the meteors for every Persona ride, there's a higher percent chance of them hitting into triggers, especially if they're resolving and drawing a bunch of cards. They're filtering upwards to 4 cards in a turn, which is kind of nutty. I ain't gonna lie. So the chance of them hitting a trigger is relatively high, and there are moments where you're going to be choked out on damage. So yeah, that's going to be nice. So you could say it's now more streamlined. Yes, this is a more streamlined list of it. This is just sort of like how I feel that it's very good at the moment. You can add some other tech options. I've seen some people run the grade 2 that discards Blast 1 call itself as a grade 2. So it allows you to push on grade 2 a little bit more, especially if you want to match your opponent on damage and you don't really care about it being retired and still 5k shield, which is good. And I used to play the Bison, which is also pretty good too. It's entirely up to what your tastes are. And then of course the rest of the grade 3s are Orfist Regis. Trigger lineup, relatively simple. I run 4 times the effect draw triggers, 3 vanilla crits, 4 of the effect crits, 2 vanilla heals, and 1 of each of the effect heals. And then obviously the 1 over trigger that helps close out games. The heal trigger options, they can be against a lot of different matchups. This one is good for against Gravidia or against a lot of archetypes that can tend up to, getting crits on their rear guards, like Lorena Roll on their Vanguard. It just gives you a way of being able to shield against other matchups, or especially if you're playing against another archetype that can gain crits relatively easy. This is really good. This is good against Bastion. It's good against archetypes that tends to multi-attack and restun a bunch of their rear guards, like Bruce, for example. This tends to cover a lot of the stuff that I tend to have against. And so if I'm against a matchup where one is not good into the other, and if I happen to have both in my hand or either drawn, I can use it just as Bear Shield. So then, since I know then I know what deck they are inside and out, and there's no way they're getting one effect off over the other, I could just use it as a 10k shield into a 10k rear guard hit. It's really good. It's really good. I like that a whole lot. I've seen some people run 2 and 2 instead. That's fine. Some people run 4 of one and 4 of the other. I think that's a little bit iffy on that one. I prefer this one for myself because I played against a lot of matchups, and I feel that both of them have their merits, and closing yourself off to either or the other feels like a very narrow situation. And I think that Orfist is one of very few archetypes that can play both and still play vanilla. It's really nice. Did the skill heal come up in a big turn for me? Yes! Against the Gravidia player, why we were able to stay in a very good lead against them is because they missed one of their Persona right turns, but still were able to resolve a 3 meteor, and then I knew they couldn't have any more triggers left, because I kept on asking them in the later stages of the game how many triggers out of the deck, because they were not out of the deck, but in plumbic areas, because they were constantly guarding with 30k shields, taking damage, maybe a defensive trigger here, or but then one of their last turns they used their last CB, and I happened to have this in hand, and it was a 38, and I know he wouldn't pass, so it was 2 to pass, go ahead. Or with plus an intercept, it was okay, plus an intercept, 43, 2 to pass, go ahead. If you hit it, you hit it. So it was really nice. It was really, really nice. But sadly enough, they hit a 6 damage OT, so they were able to live, and I died. But, it is what it is. And then, of course, the ride line. There's actually a Brant Gate starter meta, which which I found very funny. That some people, I didn't know that some people ran the prison starter even if they're not running a prison deck, because then a lot of people tends to play their hands, their first initial hands, against you as though you were a prison player, or their mind is like that, or they think that you're playing Gravidia, for example, because of what you're playing, since it gives you an idea. It's weird. It's a very weird thing. It's a very weird thing. And then these, obviously, Orfist, I guess. A lot swap to Eva once for the promo. Yeah, exactly. Once a promo drops, people will swap to Eva too. So it's a weird starter meta that, you know, starters are like, oh, you're on that starter, then you're on that archetype, you know. So I mean, coincidentally, it's because I like the artwork. I like different colored haired people. My favorite color, of course, for hair is like white. I like that hair color a whole lot on people. Doesn't really matter what your skin color is. It's really good. Outside of that, I will have to say the most important part about the archetype that I had with it is that if you're going first and second. So if you're going first, you want to keep a Orfist Regis, potentially a Tech Tien, which is the grade 2 order searcher, and at least 1 or 2 orders in your hand. And this tends to be a relatively good hand, because if you're anything like me, you're probably drawing to any one of your 16 triggers anyway, and your initial first couple of damage won't really matter as much. You could even opt to like be on one order, 1 Tech Tien, so then just resolving 2. But I like having 3, so then on my Persona right turn, this gives you your 4th, more or less. So then you can afford to discard some of your orders for your right deck or discard them for PG because you happen to have a Persona ride. If going second, that game plan changes. So you send back the Orfist, since Persona riding is not going to be that more important anymore. Obviously, it'll be good if you hit it, but your most important objective is hitting 4 orders. So having any 2 orders in a Tech Tien, or having 2 orders and then your right line gets you your 4th is very important to you. That's part of your game plan. That's what you're looking to do. And of course, some semblance of shield. So having a PG, since you're going to be drawing extra cards off of your drive checks, having a PG is also pretty good too as well, to keeping your opening hand going second. But as obviously there are some matchups you want to also keep it going first. That's entirely for you to decide how you want to play that out. Mulliganing is very important in this archetype. How you mulligan, it dictates your pace of the game, dictates how many damage you're taking in the turn, dictates whether or not your matchups you can win or lose. When going second, a trigger won't hurt, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even a trigger doesn't hurt if you're going second, because obviously they're going to go into their grade 2 turn, and people tend to rush you because they know they're playing against Orfist, and if you happen to get a trigger off your mulligan, say thank you, because that trigger could possibly save your life and give you a good tempo swing, because then the only way that it'll be able to deal like 2 to 3 damage to you is that if they hit a trigger against you. And usually you can keep yourself at 1 damage. You can even use one of your tokens to attack a rear. You can opt to attack rears if you want to keep your opponent off of damage, because sometimes you can also force like 15k shield just off of blocking. I've had moments where my opponent used a 15k shield on their grade 2 when I was attacking my grade 2 that was 15, and usually you don't do that, because if your opponent hits a trigger, it punishes you because you lose your 15k shield, which you can use for later against the tokens, and then it also ends up making you take a damage, which is awful. You don't want that. So they ended up taking a crit for me, and you know, I was able to take out a rear guard. They were behind by a lot that time, and I was able to take the game over from there because of it. So yeah, that's it. I love this deck a whole lot. It's quite possibly my favorite deck in Overdress at the moment. It used to be Hexorb, but Hexorb right now is kind of outside in the rain, asking why she is not invited inside to dance with everybody else. She's the one who did not get invited to the Midsummer Dance, sadly enough. And she's not been doing too hot. But this deck has been really fun. I really do like the addition of the extra draw triggers that I'm currently playing, because I was playing like, I think 2 or 3. I think 2. I think I might have been playing like 2 draw triggers, I think. And so I opted to like 4, because I was playing like a rainbow set of triggers, like I think 2 to 3 fronts, 2 to 3 draws, a couple of crits, and then and obviously the OT after, but I just swapped it to draws and crits, and it's just been feeling really good. But you could play fronts as well if you want to build it more tanky. If you realize that your hands are just a lot more volatile in comparison to some matchups, and you're not guarding, it's not being able to guard right for you, you know, go for it. So be awesome, stay awesome, have a wonderful day. Thank y'all for tuning in and stopping on by. Be sure to give me a like, share, and subscribe. If you happen to have any takes on the deck yourself or questions that I might have not answered, be sure to, you know, put them in the comment section below. I tend to answer all of the questions that I can. So don't hesitate. Do not hesitate whatsoever.
No.